So on Discord community and emails, I get a lot of different questions, and some of them could be summarized in this one single bucket. And it usually goes something like that. And of course, I'm paraphrasing it, but it goes like, I researched something. I found out exactly what users need. I fleshed out the features. I took it to prioritize, to implement, but only a fraction of them ended up actually going live. And there's usually something like some sort of gatekeeper or someone who prevented this delivery of the features and value for the users or customers. It's kind of like a PM, let's say, or a stakeholder, or developers didn't have resource, or something along those lines, basically. There's someone always in a way. And when I get these questions in this ballpark, I always think how big this issue really is, and especially in the growing designer minds and lives and, day-to-day challenges, because a lot of that could be prevented. Now, I want to start this video with one underlying note, that you should never, ever get attached to your work. Okay, so firstly, touching on that kind of people's aspect, or a gatekeeper of sorts, someone who prevented you to deliver value to the users, let's say, or someone who trimmed down the scope. Usually that comes down because the collaboration is missing. Usually that comes down because there was some ego issues. Usually it comes down because you, maybe as a designer or researcher, got attached too much to your work. It's all of those combined, because ultimately to deliver UX, user experience, customer experience, service design, product design, you name it, whatever you're gonna skin the user centricity like, you're gonna need to work as a team, but also compromise, because each person has to bring something to the table. And that principle alone, that there's going to be a lot of overlaps between the people until you arrive at something. And you as a designer, of course, need to bring that evidence. But naturally, I'm going to tell you from my experience that you're always going to have too much. You're never going to be able to achieve everything you want to achieve, or everything what seems to be fair to improve users' life. And realistically speaking, you need to unlock that value in slices. Meaning, if you discovered these 100 elements which need to be, or factors which need to be implemented to improve users' lives, you kind of need to walk backwards and together with a team, as a team, prioritize it and say, this is what we're going to deliver now. And this is that minimum value. It could be MAP, MVP. There's a lot of expressions of that. I don't care about it. Ultimately, you need to decide what's that first release to the users, to the customers, so you can learn from it and then implement maybe more. Because what you discovered right now was 100 items. If you would just go ahead and jump into development, you're never gonna have enough resources. However big the development team is, you're never gonna have enough of it, because there's always gonna be something else to do. There's always gonna be issues to solve, bugs to fix, user experience, efficiency improvements, or any other metric or measures you might want to account for. But ultimately, the bottom line, you are never gonna have enough resources. So you cannot really attach yourself to your work, to those things which you discover. You need to be very pragmatic and very realistic of what you can deliver right now, what you can deliver tomorrow, what you can deliver next week or next year. And by then, the product is going to look very different. The needs might look very different, because the competitive landscape is going to be also different. A lot of things are going to be moving on. I think the biggest mistake a lot of designers make is that we research, we design something, and we want to deliver it all immediately. And then all of that, because developers, again, are so limited in their capacity, they take bit by bit, and then the rest, whatever is almost like mentally prioritized to be last implemented, starts to collect dust. Perhaps it's the right thing to still develop and put in, but because things dull, things go into random things. For example, the concept of entropy should creep into your mind and stay there for, years to come, because it's something you as a UX designer, as an experienced designer, should always think about. I also view it as nature's tax in a way. It's a law of everything ultimately dying or going to disorder or going to randomness, however you want to express it from physics perspective or philosophy perspective, psychology perspective, we perceive things as they are, and they all go to nothing. So if you start with something today and you are too attached to that work, and let's say it's arranged on 100 items, chances are majority of it is gonna dull out and not gonna make it live in the right way, unless you're so lucky that you have a big enough team, you have big enough capacity. But even then, you should reflect and say, hey, this is reality. I can't get attached to my work because of, again, entropy, because there's other people involved who needs to be on board, who have their own experiences, backgrounds, evidence. You as a UX designer are bringing that cohesiveness, and you glue things together, or try to, for a lack of a better term. And if you were to ignore all of this and still go ahead, you're gonna find that your life is gonna become so much more harder, and also you wouldn't be progressing much. If you think about what takes, let's say, a junior to midway to senior to lead to manager to head of to very executive level designers, let's say, if this is the progression you seek, or this is where the long term you kind of want to get to, the skin in the game should persist, but in a different angles. Your individual contribution or attachment to specific day-to-day scenarios is just gonna go down, almost gonna become zero, because the more you progress, the more collaborative your work becomes, because you need to align things, you need to get people on the journey, the less you can get attached to your work. Again, tomorrow, the things you found out today might not be an issue anymore. If it's still a brand new thing you want to bring to the market, like a product or a service, of course it's still gonna be relevant. But if you've captured, again, 1,000 of different items, chances are maybe 10 of them makes into a market. And then you learn and maybe find another 100 items which you still need to prioritize. That's a life cycle of any product design and development effort, which you should be fine about, because everything, again, pivots to survive. We wouldn't be able to progress if user experience design or research or delivery very linearly. It's impossible. That's why there has been a rise in agile ways of working. It's to learn and repetitively create these small, or as small as possible, feedback loops. And you're not gonna find anything else. You might find like a waterfall type of working, where you define the massive design package and then send it to development and they make it happen, sort of, because again, it might be too much. It might be that it needed more prioritization, or it might needed much more smaller incremental value release, things of that nature. But you cannot get bogged down on it. You cannot get attached too much to your work. And majority of your work is gonna be crap anyways, especially if you work in isolation. But so never ever work in isolation. Try to release the findings. Let's say play back your research synthesis and themes as early as possible to bring the team on board, because only a fraction of those things you do, doesn't matter if it's research or design or prototypes or whatever it is gonna make it live, and you should be totally fine with that. If you define 100% of something and 1% makes it live today and maybe 2% tomorrow, it's totally fine. Be okay with it. Even if you defined 100% of that and it didn't go live, maybe it's for a right reason, maybe it's too risky, maybe the cost of bringing it live and taking that risk is too much. Absolutely fine with that. And I remember very clearly as a senior designer back in the day being so attached to different outputs. I would design a lot of different things, but in the end, let's say it would get deprioritized, or there wouldn't be enough budget to release it, or there wouldn't be even enough budget to pass it to development to tinker and experiment and take it forward, because those things might have been too risky to actually go ahead with. Because those opportunities you discovered could have made sense there and then, but would require so much budget to implement that instead the automation of the actual task, or skipping the UI altogether, because less UI is always the best UI. You want to improve users' lives, to reduce the interactions, that overhead, the decision making. And that alone is also going to force you to be a better person in the end. You're going to need to face your ego, your demons, your attachment to things you produce because it's almost like quote unquote a part of you. But all of those things prevent you from being good UX designer because again, UX design is team sport. It's a collaboration effort. It's why, let's say, some designers achieve so much or deliver such great outcomes or work on such grandiose projects is because we are part of these bigger teams, and then the score takes care of itself. It's never just one champion who does amazing work. It's the team sport. I'll just leave it at that. Don't get attached to your work.